everyone, welcome back to Event About It, the Dynamic Dialogue After Show. I'm your host, Megan Martin, and I am here this week with Anca Trifan. For anyone who doesn't know Anca, let's give you a quick refresher. She's a speaker, podcast host, and seasoned event professional with 20 years of experience in AV production, AI integration, event technology, strategy. She also hosts her own podcast. We'll be sure to link over to that, Events Demystified, where she explores AI, event tech, and industry trends. She's also the senior manager at strategic partnerships, event technology, and AI at Meetings and Incentive Worldwide. She's the founder of Trifan Events, a women-owned agency specializing in AI-driven event solutions. And through her Fit for Events framework, we're going to talk all about wellness and fitness, why it's important for event profs, where she advocates for wellness in events and promoting a balanced approach to success. So first thing I kind of want to dig into is you founded your own woman-owned production company, which, as we know, there's not a lot of those in the space to begin with. Trifan Events, producing live hybrid events, also producing podcasts. We talked about Return on Wellness, which is an amazing podcast you produce with David Stevens as the host, plus your own Events Demystified. So why did you start this company? Why was it important to you to have a woman-owned AV company? And what are some of the strategies that you kind of used as you were building this? Because obviously that's unique. Not everybody wants to trust a woman in AV. So how did you combat some of that?
That's a great question. First off, thank you for the introduction. I was like, I need to run that through ChatGPT, make it a little more concise.
Well, you're so accomplished. I wanted to
It's
cover
a mouthful.
everything. I know, but you can't miss anything. There's so many good nuggets in there and you do so much. So we want to cover it.
That's what happens when you're, 20 something years in events and you've done a lot of things.
Absolutely.
So to your question, starting Trifan Events was really about honestly taking control of my life and my career. I had spent many years up to that moment working for other AV production companies. I had some great experiences, a lot of growth, and I was already running a lot of events for massive clients. And when I was at this crossroads. That's when I realized that not only was I really good at what I did, but I also wanted to kind of do it my own way. I've learned a lot up until that moment, and I was always taking notes. Like if I were leading this company, I would do things differently, or if I were to be in charge of like this production, this is what I would do. And I always wanted to lead with purpose. I wanted to create impact and also bring a level of excellence and care that I didn't always see in the industry. Not that there's not a lot of production companies out there. They do put a level of excellence in what they do. But I think as women, we bring an extra level of detail and empathy. And that was something that I knew that had going for me. I also knew that I had this desire for autonomy. I wanted to choose who I work with, what I was going to design, what was the process that was going to take, and serve my clients at the highest level, but my way.
Yeah.
And I wanted to create opportunities for other women in production and AV. And many women, they still struggle with not always being put in lead AV roles because that's still very much a space that's largely male dominated. So
Sure.
for me, Fun Events became a way to lead with my values, bring heart and intention to events, and also integrate my tech background, my computer science background, my production skills, and then the understanding of the human emotion and condition to create experiences that connect and move people. So it wasn't just about producing events; it was really about creating those meaningful experiences, um, and it worked out. Was it always easy? No. Is this industry still struggling with giving women a chance? I think we come a very long ways, but it wasn't always the case. And I hope that through a lot of the things that I've done, a lot of the advocating that I've done, a lot of the big mouthing that I've done as well.
Hey, the
uh,
squeaky wheel gets the grease, right?
that's right. That will hopefully make life easier for many other women that will decide to lead their own production houses and lead teams in this direction and make their own impact in their own way.
I love that. And I think we talked in the Event About It podcast a little bit about why you went to South by Southwest this year and your attendance there. But I think one thing we didn't talk about was you were there to actually speak on this very topic. So give us a little hint about what your session was about.
It was amazing to honestly. I had two roles. One, I was mentoring on the event technology AI track, innovation track, and I got to have quite a few young, out of college women that connected with my story come and talk to me and telling like how that impacted them and how they wanted to learn more and connect with me and find ways in which I can mentor them outside of South by. So we exchange information. I was able to
That's
share with
amazing.
them the things that I've learned and the things that I saw there was opportunity for them to keep. I mean, some of those women, they're like really smart with, graduate degrees in data analytics and AI machine learning and creative like feature movie producers, future feature movie producers. So it was very, very good to have, the opportunity to um, open their mind to what's possible and encourage them to keep going on this road. And then the session was mostly about technology, AI innovation, and it was more of a private at one of the houses. There's a lot of houses like there was like the Northwest house and there was the Costa Rica house. And there's like a lot of houses, which was basically larger outside of the meetups that South Y was putting. It was by invite only. So it was kind of like a more of a private VIP-ish experience where you had different stages with different speakers talk on different topics.
It's
And
amazing.
that happened throughout the whole South by experience. So that was
That's really
mostly like
cool.
sharing the experience as a woman in this new field. And again, a lot of that sharing that was had from a lot of those activations and sessions that I've gone to, it was learning, like being able to learn peer-to-peer learning, like don't do this. This is what I've learned through this experience. Kind of like this event about it premise,
Yeah,
this is what happened when that event happened and what I would do different now in hindsight and
for
what
sure.
would be some of the steps that could have taken to avoid such situation.
What advice would you give, let's think to maybe some of the women you were mentoring at South by and will continue to? I actually love that you guys are extending that beyond the show. If they were starting their own business, how could they leverage networking and going to events? Is that an important strategy for them to grow a production business if they wanted to start one on their own, or even just getting
Mm.
deeper, more jobs in the market? Like, how would they leverage events to grow their career?
That is such a great question. And I think everyone might have to explore their own journey. Personally, for me, I think the smartest thing I ever did to grow my agency was actually launching my podcast because it opened so many doors and so many opportunities, not just to contacts that I would have never had access to, but even being known as and establishing myself as a thought leader.
Right.
And I knew from the beginning that building a brand wasn't just about what I did, it was about how people experience me and my voice. So that's basically what the podcast did. It became this platform to share expertise, to have real conversations, and talk about behind the scenes of events and AV in ways that clients and partners really connected with. So for me, that was my way to not just interview and have conversations and network per se, on air with people. And before, you have some amazing conversation with people even before you
Yeah,
go on air,
of course.
and but also educate the market, give value first, and show up as a trusted voice in the industry. And actually, that was one piece of advice that I gave to one of the young girls that she is really trying to establish herself as the movie producer that we talked about. And we know how hard that is in today's age, in the super fast content, short form content, to create
Yes.
anything of value that is not 9 second long.
I mean, it's the age of TikTok. Vine kind of started that, and TikTok is a thing for a reason.
Exactly. So, I I told her, hey, if you have a lot of passion for this industry, and if there's a way in which you can actually launch your own podcast with sharing not just what your experiences as you're building this on this, you're building yourself on this path, but then bring in those amazing uh, producers that you admire, that you would like to be mentored by, but you might not have access to, and learn from them. Like having a conversation with someone on air, it's such an opportunity for learning. And even like through my podcast and some of the episodes that I've done, especially on AI, just in season 7, and this is several years, several seasons ago, and about 2.5 years ago when we started talking about AI. I mean, some of the conversations like way above my pay grade, because we're talking about those scientists that were working in machine learning and trying to get to the version of Gen AI that we are now for,
Sure.
NLP to get to where it is, and the paradigm that had to switch. And all of those conversations just gave me such a depth of understanding of this one topic that I was already curious about and wanting to learn more about, right? So that was one of the advice that I gave. Now, in general, I always say, have jokingly, but with a little truth to it. Don't just start a company unless you're ready to work harder than you've ever worked before. I mean, to this
Breach.
day, I still work 12, 14 hours a day. And I have a full-time job. I already have a part-time job, and I'm already doing some other part-time jobs on the side. But like my day never ends, and sometimes that turns into a Saturday and a Sunday. And we think about running your own business as something glamorous, but the reality is that running a business, especially in events and production, is really tough. And you
Yes.
carry a lot of responsibility, you carry a lot of weight, you also carry a lot of risk. Like if an event went sideways and it's on your docket, I mean, you don't want to be the one responsible for 500 in-person gala gone wrong, right? Um,
Exactly.
there's also dry seasons when nothing is coming in and you still have to keep showing up and you still have to work in advance, months in advance. So I guess my advice is don't jump into it unless you really have a solid pipeline and a safety net. And that could be emotional, financial, uh, all sorts of ways in which you can build a safety net, having clients already line up for you, or a clear strategy of how you're going to find them. Because not only that are you working in the business, you're working the business. So you're like
Correct.
constantly doing multiple things. You wear so many different hats. And now that I work for a larger agency, honestly, it's so funny to me because I'm like, I have done 10 roles. Then now there's 10 people doing those roles. Like this whole time I was running my own agency, and I was doing them fast and efficient because I didn't have a choice.
Right. Well, I
And
was going
some
to ask you, with the transition to working sort of this full-time agency role, although you're not necessarily producing with that role, what has that been like, going working for yourself, making your own day, that grind and passion you have to show up to do it every day, to now have this full time? Like, how's that transition been for you?
It's been honestly great because the thing was when I decided to move from running my own company full time to work in a larger corporate structure at meetings and incentives worldwide. That has been a big shift, but it was one that I was also ready for because I'm
Yeah.
someone who is driven by growth in my skills, in my knowledge, in the impact that I can make. And I reached a point where I had done everything that I could within the walls of my business. And I also knew the type of liability and risk I can take and at what level. And I realized that I am not able to pass that. This is where I hit the wall, and I can keep grinding, trying to push through the wall. Or if I wanted something new and challenging, I had to switch paths. I had to switch directions. So I really wanted to go deeper into event technology, AI, strategic partnerships. And I wanted to do it in a space where I could also learn from others and lead at a higher level and make a bigger impact. Again, going back to impact
Yeah.
across a broader client base. And I might not be able to necessarily run events on site, even though I still have some legacy clients that I'm still doing that for. I think the biggest thing for me is to dive deeper into tech solutions, partnerships. I do a lot of AI talking, a lot of workshops, a lot of internal AI education as well, and that keeps me excited and so busy.
I'm sure.
So I'm definitely leveraging a lot of the things that I've learned with Refine Events. Refine Events is still running the production for the two shows that you mentioned, but also we have three others that we work with. I have a team that works, like it's on my payroll, that actually supports me doing that. And because I've also been able to really tap into AI's opportunities, like automation, and be able to create workflows for me that I don't have to manually constantly like be hands on, that gave me the freedom to then remove myself and do other things that support my growth. So that's where I feel like there's this, it's a larger ecosystem, and I'm not saying that everybody should do that or would be able to do that, but you have to know where your capacity is at. You have to know like the type of support that you have. Like, I don't think I could do all the things that I do, one, if I didn't lean heavily in automation and a lot of the tools that I use, but also because of like my husband and the support that I have with the kids and the household, and even things like that would take my bandwidth, go grocery shopping, I don't know, uh, do random things like, oh, thanks, thank God for Roomba for vacuuming my house. Things like that take time,
They do,
So
yeah.
having a support system, whatever that looks like, especially when you have a family, when you have kids, when you have to be present over other things, right? And I choose to be present with my kids, and I choose to do the things that are very intentional when I have the time. But then also my kids look at my schedule and they say, okay, so I see there's a gap in your schedule on Saturday
Your kids are like sending
afternoon.
you calendar invites for like when they can talk to
Let's go and
mom.
do something fun. I'm like, I'm down for it. Let's go.
I love it. And I also love this is the beauty of AI, and we're going to get into that next, of the automation and workflows, even starting, myself wearing many hats and working a lot of different jobs in the sector now. Kind of the reverse of you is worked full time for a long time, kind of dipping my toes a little bit in entrepreneurial life going into 25 while still having a full-time job and being, really honest in the firewalls that I've put up to keep everything, ethical and kosher and all of that. There's workflows intentionally set up for this podcast, and also knowing when it's time to bring in help. And so,
Yes.
there's an episode coming out around the same time as this one with the producer of the show, Rachel, and the amount of work she does to take off my
Yeah.
plate so that I can balance everything. And, even little things like hiring a housekeeper because I don't
Yeah.
like cleaning the bathroom. I don't like doing the vacuuming, and neither
I'm
does my
right there with
partner.
you.
So, like, we get a housekeeper and do all the things
Yeah.
to like offload some of that,
Yeah.
because ROI isn't always just on return on financial investment, it's also return on your time. And
Yes.
where do I want to spend my time? It's not on a weekend when I finally have a break from all the work. I don't want to have to then be like, okay, well, I need to spend 2 hours cleaning the house.
Right.
Like, that's
And I
not an
used to
ROI.
do that, and I feel like I was so OCD about having my house sparkling clean all the time. And some of those expectations that I set for myself, I had to let go of.
Yeah.
Like, what world do we live in? Like, who am I waiting to just come into the house at any given time without actually a heads up for me to have this house constantly clean? So now, if the kids want to turn the living room into a Lego nightmare, I let them.
Yeah. I mean, and even if people do come over, I'll be like, judge me all you want. I don't care. Like, this is just my house. And I don't even have kids. And it's just probably not that clean. Okay, shifting gears a little bit, let's talk a little bit about AI. It's everyone's talking about it. It's very good. There's so many good applications for it and how people can use AI in their day to day. I mean, I even use it for personal things, not just necessarily work things. But I think it can get really overwhelming because
Hmm.
there are so many AI tools. There's so many different ways to use it. Everyone's talking about it. Where do we start? If I'm just finally over some of the apprehensions that maybe come
Hmm.
with using an AI tool, where do I start? How do I even start evaluating which tool should I use?
I think to your question about, or your statement about people feeling overwhelmed, it's because they think that they need this full AI stack or dozens of tools just to be effective. But honestly, you can accomplish so much with just one well chosen tool if you're willing to lean into it and learn it properly. So I think one of the biggest misconceptions is that you need all those tools to just get started. I started learning how to use and prompt ChatGPT to the point that I can do, I would say, 80% of everything that I want to do, including writing, brainstorming, client communication, and analysis, reporting. I mean, transcripts, extract like executive summaries from transcripts, and create agendas, create RFPs, study contracts, and look at terms and make sure that legally we're covered. All those things I do so much with ChatGPT, and that's where it goes to. I don't need 20 tools to do the things that I need. I just need one tool that is deeply connected to how I do things and is deeply connected with how I want it to be training it. And then it's integrated into my workflow. So even like this workflow that we talked about, support workflow that we both do, for our podcast, I have a build and I programmed this custom GPT to act like an app to be my support system for my podcast. And it runs like an app. And yes, I had to learn Python, and I've never used Python before. And what do you think I used to learn Python when I needed to? ChatGPT. The
Yep.
cool thing is, like, within those tools, you have so many options. And like even with ChatGPT as an app on, say, your Mac, you can screenshot every other window that you're working on and be able to pull that data in and say, okay, tell me what's wrong with this code. I was able to embed ChatGPT in VS Code to be able to code, right, for Python. And I'm like, I have no idea what I'm looking for. Why is this code not working? And that's like the process of learning and making sure that whatever it is that you do in your workflow, you really map that and then use the tool that you're most, I guess, connected to. Some people say, I have an affinity for Gemini. Others might say, well, I've used Claude the longest. Or others will say, well, I think Perplexity is the best tool for me because that's the type of work that I do. And others be like, I can only use Copilot because I'm within, the Microsoft Enterprise umbrella, and that's the only approved tool in our AI tech stack. There's so much to be done, and that's why I constantly say, I can't tell you how important it is to just start with your own workflow. Look at the tasks that are taking you most of the time. Where are you bogged down? Maybe if you're spending hours writing or rewriting emails or creating event copy or researching venues or generating agendas or researching speakers or creating, speaker prospectus or sponsor, who knows? Pick one area where AI could give you back that time, start there, and don't just try to like do everything at once, automate everything at once, right?
Right.
Start small, learn, build from there. Most likely, if you're building any automation, I'll tell you from the get go, you're going to have to go and reiterate. Like one example of this, I built a Power Automate automation for myself to give me an update on a client proposal that would come through to a different team member. And then whenever that there was an update in the process, have that team member set up an appointment in my calendar for us to have a quick chat about it so we can move into the next stage of that process. And I forgot to stop that loop of how that was going to happen. So one day I wake up to like 20 appointments on my calendar, and I'm like, what the heck? Like, where did those come from? Yes, there were 15 minutes increments, but still, I'm like, what the hell just happened, right? So then I go back and I'm looking, I'm like, oh God, it's my automation like running rampant and putting all these calendar updates to the point they're like, my boss is like, you're really busy. I was trying to get like some time with you, and like I couldn't find anything on your calendar. I'm like, no surprise.
Be like, chatbot took over. We've got to fix the automation.
That's right. So you're always going to have to go back to reiterate and then proof check it to make sure that it does what's supposed to. That's where I say AI is like a partner. It's not a replacement, because if I were to let AI run rampant, I don't know what would happen with, say, my automation for LinkedIn, for the content on LinkedIn, or who knows, like Facebook, Instagram, all of that. Who knows what I would start posting like randomly, and people like, what happened?
Be like, I got hacked by my own bot.
That's
It took
right.
over. The own bot
Setting
I
all these
trained.
appointments in my calendar,
It's like showing up
sending
for
me
appointments you
places that
don't
go
even have.
nowhere.
Yeah, appointments that don't exist.
Exactly. I mean, if you want
I,
to look busy, that could be a strategy.
there's all kinds of tech out there to always keep your teams on green so that even if you're not working, your bosses think you're working. So maybe that's the key. Like every 20 minutes, you have an
I just
automation that
gave you a
puts a
tip.
meeting on. Yeah. If you want your boss to think you're super busy, train your bot to put meetings on your calendar.
That's right. Just make
No,
sure
I
that it
think
does it between 8 and 5 p.m. so it's not like outside of your work hours.
I mean, pro tip right there. I mean, I think that's a great place to start. And that's kind of where I started dipping my toe into the AI world is like, okay, what are some of the menial tasks that I need help with? And, getting this podcast together and putting those automations, it was like, okay, how do I set up an automation so as soon as the recording's done, it goes straight and sends a notification to our producer. As soon
Right.
as we have a release date for it, it adds all of the social media dates on the calendar, and then we can go back and add the content later, but at least it's added to the calendar and we know we need to do it. It automates to-do lists and tasks, and
Yeah.
so it just kind of helps all those things that I would mentally have to remember to do. And same with calendars, I use an AI bot to link all of my different work calendars to keep everything straight. It only took me ghosting someone one time because I forgot about a meeting, and I was like, nope, there has to be a solution for this because I don't ghost people. I was so embarrassed. I'll never forget it. Thank God it was a friend and he was very kind to me for ghosting him. But I was like, this can never happen again. There has to be a tool. And
Yeah.
thankfully, there are many AI calendar tools to help out. But I think to your point, it's finding some of those tasks that can be automated with an AI tool and just start really
Yeah.
learning, experimenting, trying, low risk
Yeah.
things to get comfortable with it.
Absolutely. And for anyone that's wondering, okay, so what's that magical AI tool? Honestly, I do a lot of that I just mentioned in Notion. Asana has a lot of AI automation that
I
you can build for
love Notion.
yourself.
I build so much in
And I
Notion.
build a lot of databases, and a lot of my automations are actually built just because it integrates with so many different third
Yeah.
party apps and tools. And you can start right there, right? So you don't need some kind of expensive tool. And for the longest time, honestly, I use Notion as a free tool until I
Yeah.
started, I'm like, okay, I am expanding into automation, and I need to pay for the pro version because I can't do that with the free version. But there's a lot of things that you can do even within the scope of that, and so many other tools. Like I said, I barely touched the surface on what you could use for what. um, Another one that I think it's worth mentioning, especially if you are dealing with a lot of documents and you're interacting with a lot of speakers and a lot of data that you are wanting to converse with. I lean heavily on Notebook LM,
I
and
love
I would
Notebook
upload
LM.
so many reports and then create insights and executive summaries that then I can take, to my team, or just compare things. And the best part of that, like, you can even have like a podcast
I
generated off of that. I
I
had a
literally built my social media plan in Notebook LM.
See,
Yeah.
exactly. I actually I have this mini season on my podcast called AI Talks, and it's based on content that I'm recycling right now. Like, I've written a lot of blogs over the course of my lifetime, and I do have the copy of all of those. So now what I do with that, like, up until this moment, I mean, you put it somewhere on a blog, on a website, and you don't even know who's watching. I mean, sure, you have analytics, you can go back, but for the most part, if it's like from years back, nobody's going back to to
Right.
see that. So I'm reviving some of the older but very evergreen content about, AV best practices and technology and things like that that can still be reused. Running it to Notebook LM and creating mini AI episodes where I don't even have to be the host. I have the AI. But the coolest part of that is that now you can even interject as a guest with those two AI hosts and be like, wait a second. I actually came up with the concept in 2018 while I'm preparing for my TED talk. And they're like, oh, well, tell us more.
It's like talking to a minion.
Exactly. You lesser being, tell us, enlighten us.
Sorry, I love it. And I think that's a good event prof, marketing, event marketer tip too, is go back. Like everybody loves a throwback. We all love to know, like, where was the world? Because, there's a lot of stuff coming, 5 years ago was when COVID hit. So like everyone's been kind of going back, and I've seen a lot of posts of like, where were you 5 years ago this
Right.
week? And
Yeah.
all the social posts coming out where like, oh, I thought I
Oh
was
my
leaving
gosh,
the
you're
office for
right.
2 weeks and I never went back. And I think
You're
everyone
so
loves a good
right.
throwback to
It's literally March 14,
correct.
2000. That a lot of 2020, that a lot of things happen. I just made a connection. I'm
Yes.
like, what is all this post everybody's posting about? Like literally, I'm
Yeah.
like just not even thinking about it. I'm like, you're right. Yeah.
It was 5 years ago this week. And, it just kind of shows that even then, in those sort of traumatic moments where we didn't know what was happening, everyone loves reflecting. And so you
Yeah.
can use that as marketing genius, basically, without having to create anything new. Just resurface and put a series together of like, man,
Yeah.
here's the best 5 episodes from 5 years ago before we knew the world was going to shut down. Let's, uncomfortably relive the first 6 months of COVID pandemic when we were all stuck at home, and what were we talking about? Is that still relevant?
Yeah.
Repurposing content is one of the easiest things to do with AI, and just looking at some
Yeah.
of that data and what was really popular, put it back up, give it a new little facelift, and you have just as much success reusing that as you are going through all the hoops of creating something brand new.
Exactly.
Throwback always. I love it.
Yeah. I mean, that's why we still like to read like a really good novel of like written 200 years ago. Who knows, like 2000 years ago, because we like to get back into that mindset. There's some novelty to that. And
Yes.
I hope we'll keep doing that because, I mean, yes, we keep evolving and there's new technology coming out. I mean, so many things happen in 5 years, right? Like just thinking
So
about it, I'm like, I
much.
can't believe that there's so much that just everything exploded in 5 years' time.
Yeah.
And where I was in 2020 and where I am now, they're two different planets.
I mean, I'm a completely different human now than I was five
Yeah,
years ago, for sure. For sure.
exactly.
Well, that kind of segues in. Part of why I'm a different human these days is definitely leaning into my own fitness journey.
Mm,
And in addition to your AI passion, you have a lot of passion for fitness. Some people may not know this, but you're actually competitive fitness. Like you've been in many competitions. So definitely there on the internet, go look at Anka's Instagram. You'll be totally jealous. I'm always jealous. I remember after our IMEX session, some of my teammates came up and they were like, "Is she a bodybuilder? Like, why does that? What have you seen her arms?" I'm like, "Yes, I've seen her arms. We don't have to talk about it. Like, she looks amazing." But one of the things you talk a lot about, and I certainly hadn't heard about this until we kind of discussed a little bit, is biohacking. So,
hmm.
kind of give us the 101 of what is biohacking and why do planners need to pay attention to this?
Totally. Well, let me first lean a little bit into how this whole started for me because I think it's a great segue from COVID because this is one of the most personal things that I opened up to share about because bodybuilding has really saved my life post COVID. And I'm serious about that. I've had such an emotional toll that I was going through of losing someone really close to me during the pandemic. And it wasn't just professionally, it was personally. And I found myself in a very, very dark place mentally and emotionally. And lifting became kind of like my form of therapy. Eventually, obviously, I also started with a real therapist, which I highly recommend. Five
Hey,
stars.
therapies. People hate on therapy. It's amazing. I did it for
Yeah, but
many years.
at first I had all the misconceptions of like, oh, I don't want to talk to a shrink. They're going to figure out that I'm broken and they're going to figure out that I have a lot of grief and trauma from years.
Spoiler alert, we're all broken and
Right.
crazy and weird. Every single human on planet.
It was the best decision I've made. But really, during that time, it was kind of like my form of therapy, my way of processing grief, stress. And it started giving me structure, discipline, and purpose when everything else, like including COVID felt so out of control. And the fact that I could have a say, I could have some level of control over my own physical transformation, where I became stronger and leaner, and more importantly, I became resilient, confident, and mentally sharp. That to me was the best outcome of that entire process, because fitness for me is leadership training. The discipline that I built under the barbell, it ended up then showing up in my business and in my life. And when I was hitting challenges at work, I knew how to keep pushing because I've already practiced that. And someone said, I think it was David that said on his podcast, bodybuilding and fitness and training hard is like getting yourself used to failing again and again.
It's
Because,
finding the limit. You talked earlier and
yeah,
also in the Event About It podcast, like you have to know where that line is. Like how hard can you push yourself? And if you don't push yourself at all, you don't even know where
yeah,
it is.
because in fitness, you constantly train to failure. You train to fail because that's the way you build resilience, and that's how muscle growth. Like you constantly have to push towards that. So that's how that ties into fitness, fit for events, my framework for event professionals. And I feel like this industry is already so stressful physically, mentally, emotionally, and you can't serve clients at the high level that we all desire to serve if you're constantly running on empty. So to your question, biohacking is really the small intentional changes that you can make that can create the biggest impact, the biggest results, whether that's optimizing sleep. Hello, if only I could do better to sleep 8 hours instead of 5 hours every single night. I swear to God, my brain is operating at a much faster speed, focus level, and no supplements, no medical intervention, the form of medicine or who knows what people take these days, will support that. It's sleep. It's as simple as that, right? Tracking macros to at least track your protein intake to know that you're not in a deficit. Weight training, strength training, especially as you get older and your muscle literally disintegrates as you get older unless you put some purpose behind it to keep at it, to get stronger, leaner, not leaner, I would say toner, but the purpose is to really build that muscle mass that supports. Peter Attia says something super interesting. That's why I really like his session I connected with. In your 40s, you have to start training for how you're going to operate when you're 70 and 80. So the training right now is, what is my life going to look like when I'm 70 and 80? And I have to start training for it now. So
Yes.
what type of steps do you have to take for yourself? So when you think of yourself, you're 70, 80, 90, 100, you can still operate at the level, at least close to the level that you are now, physically, mentally, emotionally. So for event professionals, especially for us women, biohacking is really a way to build capacity to thrive and not just survive, really.
I certainly am resonating with this. I worked with a nutritionist most of the end of last year and this year. I just finally came to a realization that as much as I love food and I love to eat, I am not a good eater. I don't eat breakfast typically, at least then last year and previous years, I wasn't eating breakfast. It showed up on show site, whenever I was producing events, you're working, 15, 16, 17-hour days, barely sleeping, barely eating, and your brain doesn't function as well. And then add alcohol on top of that. You're at these receptions till God knows how late, pumped full of alcohol. And then you have to get up at 5 o'clock and do the yoga session or turn the lights on and be the first in and the last out. And it just wasn't sustainable for me anymore. So I started
Yeah,
working with a nutritionist and a hormone specialist as, approaching my 40s, as you said, we're got to get it right now to live the longevity. And
yeah,
it was eye opening to me to basically be told you're basically malnourished because
yeah,
I wasn't eating protein. I wasn't tracking it. The only meal I ate really consistently a day was dinner. And now paying attention to that and having a solid breakfast every day, eating a solid lunch, tracking how much water I'm drinking every
yeah.
day, tracking the protein. I show up so much better
Yeah.
in every aspect of my life now. You know, my hair was thin and falling out,
Hmm.
and I'm a better version of myself because I started paying attention to those things, and I show up better to work. I show up better on site. I'm clearer, making better decisions, you know, personally and
Yeah.
professionally, I think overall, um, because of doing some of those. Where I have struggled is with the travel, right? I'm great at home.
Hmm.
I'm in a routine. I'm doing really well.
Yeah.
And then as soon as I get on the road and get out of my groove is where I kind of start falling off the wagon a little bit. As you travel almost every week, at least for the last couple months, speaking at all these shows, how do you find that you're keeping up when you're getting fed buffet food and
Hmm.
you don't necessarily have access to everything you do at home? How are you biohacking to keep that level up when you're traveling?
First off, let me just give you some kudos for taking control over your life, and not just your life. I think the biggest misconception that we have is that modern medicine is going to save us. I don't care what's going to happen when I'm 60 or 80 or 90. By then, we'll have like all this medicine is going to save us. Modern medicine extends lifespan, but it fails a
Yeah,
health span. And if we want to stay strong and sharp, especially as I said, into the old age, um, protein, weight training, those are non-negotiable. And that to me is something that I want to give you kudos for, because I can talk about it, but I hope that it's not just, me talking about it. It's having the impact on those around me in my sphere of influence. And I hope I had a little bit of influence on you,
of
because
course.
I get those messages all the time in my DMs where people initially their first reaction is, especially when I post on LinkedIn, is, "You're so fit. I don't want to hear it. Here I am overweight." But then I know it gets to them because they
Yeah,
come back after that first reaction. And I get it. It's intimidating. That's okay. But after that reaction, they come and say, "You know what? I started working out. I started going to the gym. I started doing this and that." And yes, they might do it at a different level. Totally okay. Start where you are and keep at it. To me, that's the biggest win. So I did my job.
for sure.
Whatever I was posting actually had the impact that I was hoping that it would.
I mean, that
So
certainly had an influence on me, but also playing pickleball and getting your ass kicked by a bunch of 70-year-olds who are fitter and better and everything than you at a sport that you should be, you know, kicking their ass at was finally like, all right, I gotta get my shit
I
together.
mean, if you look on the pickleball court, some of the like most preeminent players are older gentlemen and ladies, and you're
Yes.
like, dude, like, but they play pickleball like 8 hours a day. Like those are
I
like
mean,
strong
I
players.
don't disagree, but it's a very humbling moment
It
that
is.
was, I hate to admit it, somewhat transformative in my life of like,
I was
God
like,
damn, I
how is
gotta
it
get
I'm
this
not stronger
together.
than a 9 year old? Like, what's going on here? But to your
Exactly.
question, how do I do it? I think my biggest, I would say, experience doing that was in 2023, the fall of 2023. I was running full speed ahead with my business, and oh my gosh, I was running so many events, traveling nonstop without a break. And then just to make things better, that was the first time I decided to do a competition. It was November 20, no, it was 2022, 2022, I think. And yes, 2022. And to be in prep, and prep, if you're a bodybuilder, you have to understand, like, when you're bulking up and you're building muscle, you have the luxury to eat carbs the way you want it, to fill up on all the carbs. Yes, protein is always high, fat not always that much. For us women, it's important to have a good amount of fat just because of our hormones. So carb is the leverage that you have based on where you are in your season. If you're going to bulk up, carbs is like all the way up high. And carb is what makes you happy. I'm like, that's all the good food, all the
I mean, give
stuff
me all
is
the
carb.
mashed potatoes all day, every day.
Exactly. I mean, good quality carbs, right? So as I was going through my prep, closer to my to stage lean is when you start cutting your carbs. And when you start cutting from 300 grams a day to all the way to 60, 80, and 60. Now, to just give you some kind of a like understanding what 60 carbs means is basically a banana has like 20 carbs. So think of the amount, the choices that you have to make, knowing I only get this many carbs, and it becomes a math problem, and it starts consuming your life, and it becomes the only thing you think about is what am I going to eat next. So this is in the middle of the busiest seasons, and I had this goal for myself. I'm going to compete for the first time, and I really want to do well, because when I get myself into something, I give it my all. So I was running like 100 miles an hour, firing from all cylinders. But I'll tell you, it was the hardest thing I've ever done, because to do that on show side, I know that I had white eggs in the morning, and I couldn't touch whatever that was there for lunch. And I had to wait for dinner to be able to eat what I needed to eat at this restaurant that I already produced the menu, and I already pre-planned what I was going to have, and just have like a protein shake that I had with me. Or I had bags of spinach as my only snack. I mean,
Oh my
dry
Lord.
spinach. That's all. Because I was in such a like strict calorie intake, that I needed to be able to get to the stage weight that I was in. And every week counts. You have measurements, you have your macros, everything fluctuates, and you have to stay strict to the program. So, like I said, that was like the hardest thing I've ever done, but it tested me in so many ways, like mentally, physically, emotionally. And I wouldn't say that was the most pleasant person to be around. At least, I mean, at a client level, I was doing my best to like put on a face, right?
For sure.
But man, anyone that had to like deal with me behind the scenes,
I
that
mean,
was a
hanger
different
is a
story.
real thing. Hanger is real.
Right. But here's what that experience taught me: the fact that I was able to pull it off, the fact that I was able to bring home two swords, which is like first places, in on two different categories and different competitions, that to me was next level of accomplishment. Like, even if you gave me the title of like president of I don't know what, this was more of an accomplishment to me, because I knew the kind of grit it took and the type of resilience that it took. And I knew how hard I worked at it. And from there, I figured, you know what? Nothing that could come my way could be harder than this. So I'm ready. Like, I'm prepared for it. And then every competition after that, obviously I was able to improve and optimize, and don't do this, don't do that, choose a different season. If you're going to compete, don't do it in the middle of your busiest seasons.
Yeah.
All those things that in hindsight you would do differently, going back to
Sure.
the stories. um, but it definitely taught me so many good things. And it gave me a different level of understanding of where my limit is, and my capacity enlarged in so many different ways. So how do you do that if you're not at that competitive level, right? I think small choices and pre-planning are really the key here, because you could pre-plan to have some healthy snacks with you. You can look at your schedule and say, well, I know I'll be on site on, like, show site those hours. Let me see, is there a break in the afternoon that maybe I could go for a walk, because I really need like some like some white space.
Yeah.
Or maybe I could hit the gym because I really want to work on my on my weightlifting programming, or whatever, like strength training. um, or even with the options that are there. Yes, there's options. Sometimes you don't have a lot of options, but also packing protein. I always pack my protein powder with me. So even if I don't have the ability to, like, say, pack protein shakes in my carry-on, having powder with me and a shaker that already fills my quota for the day for protein, because I know I'll get carbs, I know I'll get fat. I don't have to worry about that. Yes, I do
Yep.
have to make some choices, maybe choose salad, no dressing, versus, this beautiful pastry that I would gladly have, but then I already know that that's not going to benefit me, especially if this is in the afternoon and I'm going to hit that post-perennial deep, and now I'm going to feel like I'm ready to take a nap, but I still have 6 hours to go
Right.
because the event is just starting, right? So small choices like that are important, and then protect your sleep. That's one thing that actually I was so proud of myself when I went last week to South by, because I got more sleep while I was there than I actually get at home. I was getting 9 hours of sleep because
Impressive.
I intentionally called it like an 8:30. That's it. I'm not gonna go to anything late night. I'm not gonna do any late night premieres. I'm not gonna go to some crazy club. I'm not gonna do all of this. It is a lot of no's that you have to say to yourself, but I think it's not so much about saying no as much knowing that that is what allows you to say yes to other things. And
Yeah.
for me, it's yes to health, yes to better sleep, more clarity, mental clarity, and longevity long term, because it's kind of like your health that the steps, the biohacks, the things that you do now, it's this investment, like your IRA account,
Yeah.
into your future, right? So it's a choice. It's a choice that you get to make, and sometimes choices are hard, especially if they're embedded in years of different type of habits, or even trauma that's associated with food intake and a lot of other things, right? But I think taking one thing and deciding, okay, I want to work on this thing, like you said, you decided that nutrition was important, and making a change there is what gave you then the confidence to add an extra layer to that. Then you do, strength training. And then maybe the next layer will be, let's do better sleep and start on a habit that will support that. Those are the biggest things, honestly. It's not magic. Again, going back to Peter
Yeah.
Attia's session at Salbai, everybody knows that he's a doctor. He's been in this a space as a longevity expert for many years. He is the one that came up with this centennial decaton idea, which basically training now for the life you want at 100, that I mentioned earlier. And everybody was like, so what is the secret to like the lifespan, to living to 100? And he basically said protein intake, strength training, and managing your energy. And everybody's like, really? Like,
They're like,
you're
oh, we
making
have to
me
work at it.
exercise, you're making me eat like healthy, make healthy choices, and you're telling me that there's no magic pill. Like, what's
Yeah.
the point of the session?
Pretty much. I love watching the documentary and read the book about blue zones, and they talk
Yeah.
pretty much about the same thing. And those are the areas that have the highest concentration of people that live to 100 or over 100. And it's fascinating research. For me, I think the little things, like you said, helped me a lot. I pack snacks now. I have beef sticks and trail
Yep.
mix, and I pack the liquid IVs, sugar free, so that I'm staying hydrated, because that's half the battle.
Yeah.
Sometimes too is not just the eating, but being hydrated.
Exactly.
And so I always have snacks at the ready for when I'm, feeling that hanger coming on. And, maybe the lunch isn't something I want to eat, or breakfast doesn't have the protein that I
Yep.
need to have on it. I have the resources with me to be able to keep going for the day.
Well, I hope you never have to go to eating spinach out of a bag.
Never,
If it
not
comes
even
to
one
it,
time.
that is a
No.
great snack. Okay, just saying.
We'll take your word for it. I never want to find out.
I think I even have an episode that I recorded. I was in San Francisco running an event at the convention center there, and I was running one of my short events, short episodes on rent. I think it was rents. That was the season. And I'm literally like with my protein shake and my spinach out of the bag, just eating. I'm like, this is the only time I get to eat, but I also get to record this episode and talk about it. So it was just like hilarious. I might go back to that sometimes. I'm like, oh my gosh, I don't want to go back to that.
Well, we don't want you to go back to it either. Well, I really appreciate the conversation. I mean, we could keep going and going. There's so many specialties, but where can we find you? You're always on the road. You're always sharing some great tips at conferences all over. So where can we find Anca online and in person?
I think the best place to connect with me is LinkedIn, Anca Trifan. You can always find all my speaking topics, podcasts, and the resources on my brand new website as well, ancaplatontrifan.me. And I mean, I'm all over social as well, but I also have many different channels based on which bucket I create content for, because I'm a very like uh,
Compartmentalized. I love it.
compartmentalized individual. Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome. Where are you speaking next? Where can we find you in person next?
The Northwest Event Show, if this airs before that, is going to be March 26, 27, 28. I'm speaking on the 27th in the morning, and it's going to be a sessions focused on AI and automation and how you can work better and smarter with the tools at hand.
Well, I love it. Thank you for joining us for the Event About It podcast and this amazing dynamic dialogue after show. Thanks for tuning in, everyone, and we'll see you at the next one.
Thank you for having me.